What if the United States had united North America? Let's explore the depths of it in the video. Imagine this. It's September 1st, 1914. After years of rising tensions and provocations from both sides, the North American Union has amassed a huge army of over 2 million soldiers stationed in southern New Mexico. Its powerful navy stretches for miles, controlling both sides of Central America, with the Panama Canal firmly under its grip. But crossing the vast expanse of the Isthmus with such a massive force through dense jungle and tropical weather is no small feat. To make matters worse, on the other sides of the strait in Colombia, a similar formidable army of the United South America waits. The eyes of the world are locked on the Americas, as the two powers of the New World stand on the brink of conflict, one clash that could determine the course of history for centuries. It's May 1812. Europe is ablaze. Napoleon is preparing for his monumental invasion of Russia, the ground shaking with the sounds of war. British forces fight in Spain and Portugal, while their powerful navy blockades the French coasts. Central Europe is in chaos, the maps of nations permanently altered by the winds of revolution and the ongoing Napoleonic Wars. Amid the general crisis, something unexpected is brewing in the heart of North America. President James Madison receives a letter from Joel Barlow, his American ambassador in Paris. He can hardly believe his eyes. Napoleon is asking for an alliance, and what he offers in exchange is quite generous. The next day, Madison orders Barlow to seek a meeting with the French Emperor.
Monsieur Bonaparte, Your Excellency, I thank you for accepting my request so quickly. The topic we are discussing is of common interest, believe me. My president has asked me to ask for the details of your plan. My campaign in Russia is a risky one, Mr. Barlow, and the British, they are following my every step, looking to strike from behind. I need distraction. We are aware of that, but my government is not ready to take such risks. You already know that. But you, coming here, it means your government is considering my proposal. 20,000 French troops, Mr. Barlow. 20,000. All to take Canada from them. We will recognize the annexation immediately. If our ships are intercepted by the British, we deny any American involvement. If they don't, you can use the troops as you want. It will be a totally secret mission. The risk is all on the French side.
And what is it you want in exchange, Your Excellency?
I have many enemies in Europe, my dear ambassador. I need some trusted friends.
We Americans are a friendly folk, Monsieur Bonaparte. I think that's something we can gladly offer. A French fleet slips past the British naval blockade in late May. Silent, swift, and deadly. 20,000 French soldiers, ready for battle, sail toward the American coast. British spies in Washington, D.C., caught off guard, scramble to alert their commanders. But it's too late. The ships have already arrived, and the soldiers begin disembarking onto American soil. On June 18th, President James Madison declares war. The American army has only 10,000 troops, roughly equal to the British force in Canada. But with the 20,000 French soldiers, the conflict tilts in their favor. As the war drags on, American mobilization pushes their forces to nearly double that number. Reinforcements from Britain, on the other hand, are too far behind. Though they manage to gather a force of about 30,000 more troops to set sail for the New World, they arrive too late. By late summer of 1812, the combined might of the U.S. and French forces has already pushed back the British defenses. Quebec, Montreal, and Toronto fall. The British colonies slip through their fingers. With the conquest of Canada, the balance of power in North America shifts irreversibly. The British are forced to sign a treaty. In Canada, their last stronghold in the New World, is ceded to the Americans. The stage is set for a new empire to rise. On a side note, after Napoleon's defeat in Europe, he retreats to a base in Washington. From there, he can plot his return. So, the historic Franco-American Treaty of 1812 changes the history not only of the Americans, but of Europe as well. The year is 1846, April 25th. The U.S. has consolidated its position in Canada and is now strengthened by its vast natural resources, manpower, and strategic positioning. Next target? What stands at the other end of the battlefield? Mexico. The tension over Texas has been simmering for years, but now it erupts into an all-out war. The U.S., bolstered by its newfound strength, moves quickly. Mexico, stretched thin and already facing an overwhelming adversary, stands no chance. The balance of power shifts decisively. The war unfolds faster than ever before. Within weeks of the declaration of war, American forces sweep southward, cutting through Mexico's defenses with relentless precision. The U.S. Navy, commanding the seas, traps Mexico, while the American army pushes forward, gaining momentum at every turn. Veracruz falls within days, its defenders crushed under the weight of American firepower. By early 1847, Mexico City itself falls. The Mexican government is forced to surrender. With Canada already under its control, the idea of absorbing all of Mexico becomes too enticing to ignore. The U.S. forces move quickly to annex the entire country. However, it's not a simple conquest. Mexico's population, 7 million strong, is a massive addition. The annexation would alter the very fabric of the United States. Texas, New Mexico, and other regions fall under U.S. control, as expected. But the heart of Mexico, Mexico City, Veracruz, and Chiapas, are granted a temporary status of autonomy. The process of integration will take time, but the future is clear. The U.S. is now something else entirely. Its population swells by nearly a quarter, and the political and administrative changes needed are monumental. To keep the peace and prevent resistance, political rights are granted to the Mexican population. The country itself undergoes a dramatic transformation. The United States of America no longer fits the scale of the continent it controls. The country adopts a new name, United North America, U.S.A. A new flag emerges, incorporating Mexican insignia, symbolizing the unity of this new superstate. The war is over. The United North America rises, and the world, once again, shifts on its axis. But the country has yet to face its greatest challenge, its internal tensions. Enter the American Civil War, only on a much larger scale than the original. The Confederacy is bolstered by Mexico's wealthy landlords, who side with the South. Its population is almost the same as the North. Its wealth is immense. However, Mexico, in exchange for support, demands significant autonomy, terms that cannot be ignored. The North, too, faces its divisions. With the nation now so large and its control stretched thin, many voices call for compromise and a peaceful resolution. The military, which has expanded in size and scope, becomes just as fractured as the government. Soon, the war evolves into something far bloodier and longer than anyone expected. By 1865, the conflict is still raging, and no side is winning. Then, the unexpected happens: the assassination of President Abraham Lincoln. The leadership vacuum becomes critical, and Vice President Andrew Johnson struggles to maintain order. But his lack of support and authority proves ineffective. The Union falls into chaos. Amid the crisis, Ulysses Grant, the prestigious general of the Northern armies, with growing political ambitions, rises to prominence. With the backing of the army, he assumes emergency powers that effectively eclipse the authority of the president. From this position, Grant implements a ruthless total war strategy, uses the North's industrial might, and finally defeats the Confederacy, securing a Union victory by 1866. But the victory is bittersweet. The nation, ravaged by years of conflict, struggles to rebuild. Grant's leadership faces immense pressure. As the country stares at the aftermath of war, the question of reconstruction looms large. Mexico especially is in disarray. Crime rates soar, and tensions between settlers and Native Americans erupt into violence. Historians make analogies with the Roman Republic and its civil wars. They ask for a new Julius Caesar. Grant, grappling with the extent of the damage, begins to question the very structure of the United States. He sees the failure of the old system, realizing that the country can no longer function as it once did. The rapid expansion and the control of vast territories have overwhelmed the nation's ability to govern effectively. The Republic has cracked under the weight of its own ambition, and Grant knows something must change. Grant turns for advice to his most trusted friend and comrade in arms, General William T. Sherman.
How do you see the next day? The only thing I can say for sure is that the people need you, and they believe in you. What else is out there for them? The Congress? Bunch of rich bastards. Half of them are switching sides before you. They'd sell them as slaves and complain about it the next day. Or the warlords in Mexico, making alliances with the bloody Indians whenever it suits them. Ulysses, there's nobody else. If you don't act now, the people will never forgive you. Yes, but how? There are elections in 3 years. The outcome could be anything. Then control it. How? We've got evidence on most of the congressmen. We can fake more. Lock them up. Or threaten them. That would be right, Ulysses. Just right. What have they done all these years? Feeding the people lies, prolonging the war for their own benefit? Don't they deserve to be punished? But they have backup. You have the army. Trust me, they'll follow you anywhere. I will follow you. Declare an emergency in Mexico. Strike before they even realize it, and crush them. That would violate the peace agreement. It will. Just show the people the truth. They violated it first.
The next day, in a public announcement, President Ulysses Grant declares a state of emergency in Mexico and surrounding regions. He announces the suspension of parliamentary immunity for all congressmen and promises to amend the Constitution following the next elections, creating a more effective state, one where the nation would never again be divided by warmongers and individuals who placed their own interests above all else. He also calls on the people to support his initiative, to stand behind him and the nation that so desperately needs them. Thousands would rally in his support. The few voices warning that the measures were dictatorial are quickly silenced. After the 1869 elections, the political landscape is completely different. Grant wins in a landslide, particularly in the northern states, and pushes for sweeping constitutional changes. Through them, the president gains extraordinary powers, such as the right to declare war, significantly diminishing Congress's influence. The U.S. government is swiftly recognized, with the military taking control of key decisions. The centralization of power transforms the Union into a militarized state, reminiscent of Japan in its early imperial years, where military leaders and not civilian politicians hold the reins of power. The autonomy of individual states is significantly reduced, leading to a more centralized government. These changes are particularly evident in Mexico. As punishment for its support of the Confederacy, Grant implements a state of exception in the autonomous Mexican territories. Rebellions are suppressed with unrelenting force, and Mexico's states are forced to integrate fully into the Union. By 1875, the United North America is a very different entity. A superstate of nearly 25 million square kilometers with a population of 200 million, the U.S.A. is by far the largest, richest, and most powerful nation in the world. But it is also a totalitarian state, ruled by the military, with rising American nationalism and imperial ambitions that far exceed the moderate foreign policy goals that originally defined the country. The United States finds its footing in its new state, continuing its historical path with renewed confidence. Across all of North America, Native American populations are systematically extinguished, including those in Mexico. Only those of mixed origins remain, facing heightened segregation for years and faring little better than African Americans. It is an unrelenting genocide, but nobody reacts to that. From the outside, the country appears terrifyingly strong. Central American nations fall under its influence, becoming client states where American financial interests dominate all internal and international investments. In Africa, America takes control of Liberia and participates in the 1884 Berlin Conference, demanding a say in African affairs. America's power strengthens further after the Spanish-American War. It seizes the Philippines, Guam, Cuba, and the Canary Islands from Spain, securing a powerful presence not only in the Caribbean and the Pacific, but also in Africa and near Europe. With a base in the Philippines, America now looks towards mainland Asia. In 1900, the U.S.A.'s army and navy strike the Empire of China, capturing Beijing and forcing concessions. But the real turning point for the U.S.A.'s imperial rise takes place in America itself. With a combination of gifts and threats, the Central American states have already become vassals for their giant northern neighbor. South America feels the change and reunites in a coalition to challenge North American dominance. Europe soon also understands the stakes. Britain and France stand behind them, guaranteeing Colombia's independence. Around 1910, the two sides finally clash, with North America making its move with an attack on Colombia. Huge naval battles against the European powers in the Atlantic end up with thousands of victims, but in the end, the American fleet prevails. At the same time, in just a few months, the powerful army captures Bogota and moves into Chile. Brazil is the only country out of the coalition. Instead, it offers logistical and intelligence support in exchange for a complete dissociation from Portugal and some territorial gains. In a humiliating treaty, the South American coalition collapses, giving the North Americans a free hand to also completely annex Central America. The Spanish-speaking South is from now on just a series of weak states, completely dependent on North America. Fearing an invasion after the collapse of the American front, Britain and France are also forced to surrender. In exchange, America takes extensive territories in Africa, along with control of Polynesia from France and British territories in the Caribbean, Gibraltar, and Hong Kong. By this point, America is a truly global power. With solid control of both Americas and stable bases in key regions of Africa, America now begins its expansion into Asia. Thailand, the only nation still independent from European colonization, swiftly becomes an American colony. With the Netherlands economically devastated after siding with Britain and France in the war, they are forced to sell Dutch Indonesia to America to give them another solid base from which to expand. The next 25 years pass, with America following an isolationist policy, consolidating its power in the new regions, preparing for its next wave of expansion. That expansion comes around the 1930s. The reason? The formation of a daring pan-Eurasian coalition. Its goal? Defeat America. All its former enemies now unite against the greatest power the world has ever seen. Britain, France, Japan, and Russia are the coalition's most powerful members. Spain, Portugal, and China are weak, but they also join, hoping to regain strength if America is defeated. Eurasia, for the first time in history, becomes a true fortress, both from the Atlantic and the Pacific. A global crisis unfolds quickly. President-Commander Franklin Roosevelt immediately seeks an emergency meeting with his generals, as well as representatives from Brazil, the African colonies, and Indonesia.
Gentlemen, we need to strike first and strike hard. What are your proposals?
Let's storm France. Concentrate all our forces in the Atlantic and show these treacherous Europeans who their true leader is.
I agree. All African colonies are ready to attack from the south.
I must disagree, Mr. President. I believe our best chance is to strike in China. Those ungrateful Europeans are going to expect us. With the Chinese, an easy target. We can beat them in hours.
I also believe that is our best course, but I'd move more cautiously, perhaps threaten China first, and see what happens. The coalition might fall apart from within.
Gentlemen, thank you for your suggestions.
I see your points, and I'm glad to be surrounded by such brilliant and sincere colleagues in this difficult time. But it seems to me that you underestimate our strength. Yes, we will land in France. They will wait for us, sure. But they won't know what's really coming. And in China, yes, also yes. But be careful. It's Russia we must focus on, not China. Luckily, our base in Thailand is fortified and ready for any shortcomings. But I believe I have a plan those Eurasian fools haven't thought of. Mr. Sherman, would you like to present it?
Thank you, Mr. President. Gentlemen, the logic of war is simple. Strike where the chain is weakest. Strike where it hurts the most. Look at the map. What is at the center of this vast continent we need to conquer? India, gentlemen. It's rich. It's the hub of trade. It has hundreds of millions. And the Indians hate the British more than we do. I propose the following. An African squadron will head to the southern tip of India in 2 weeks. We've kept them on alert for decades. Now it's time to use them. Our Indonesian fleet will set sail at the same time, landing up to 300,000 men in a month. We've already made contact with Mr. Gandhi. He'll pose no problem as long as we fight the English and leave them be. They can have their independence, for all we care. South America is also independent. Those fools won't know what hit them. They'll send reinforcements to India, but they'll be attacked all the way by Indian irregulars. And when they don't expect it, we'll strike from both the Pacific and the Atlantic.
Will it be costly?
Yes.
Will it be victorious?
Oh, my dear Mr. President, it will be a victory beyond anything our great nation has ever seen. The plan succeeds. From their base in India, massive American armies strike Russia from the south, move into China and Indochina from the west, and unleash their full might. Meanwhile, the American fleet defeats both the Japanese in the Pacific and the Franco-British in the Atlantic, as it did historically against the Axis. The landings will be ready by 1943. Meanwhile, they liberate Central Asia from Russian control and move towards Stalingrad, opening the road to Moscow. European and Russian armies do their best to stop them, and the battles in the steppes are of an unimaginable scale. more than 10 million troops and tens of thousands of tanks and airplanes locked in combat. But America, ahead in technology and strategy, ultimately ensures victory. By 1944, London, Paris, and Moscow have fallen, and Tokyo surrenders under the threat of a full-scale nuclear attack. After achieving a complete victory, the world of 1945 would be a unipolar world, nothing like the bipolar world of the Cold War. America would dominate every corner, with bases in Africa, Indonesia, India, Indochina, China, and major military strongholds in Central Asia and Europe. What would happen from there is hard to predict. North America could follow a path of glory or destruction. Having solidified its position everywhere, it could halt its militarization and transform into a power of growth and prosperity. By the 1970s, the unified world, under a liberal and humanitarian American supervision, could have extinguished poverty and perhaps even begun colonizing Mars. The potential would be immeasurable. But of course, the darker path cannot be excluded. American leaders could grow greedy, seeking to dominate the entire world through force. An anti-American coalition could form, with states from Europe, Asia, Africa, and even within the Americas supporting resistance movements whenever American control wavers. Nuclear weapons could be unleashed, and the world might face extinction. Whatever the case, the potential for a unified America to completely alter the world balance would be immense. And who knows? These possibilities might one day come true, one way or another.